Hello, I'm Lindsay Turley, NYSCA Capital Projects Program Officer, and welcome to the webinar on MWBE Goals for NYSCA Capital Project Grants. Let's start by explaining what an MWBE means. MWBE stands for Minority or Women Business Enterprise. In order to qualify as an MWBE for this project, the firm must be certified with the state, which we will go into in more detail later in this presentation. Capital Project Fund grants require that 30% of NYSCA grant funds be allocated towards MWBEs. No match grants are not required to meet this goal. This webinar has been recorded in 3 chapters so that you can skip ahead to the section most relevant to you or rewatch your favorite as many times as you need to. The first section covers what you need to understand about MWBE at the time you apply for a capital projects grant. Next, we will have instructions and a live demo on searching the New York State MWBE Directory. And lastly, we will walk through completing the MWBE Goal Checklist should you be awarded a NYSCA grant. At the time of application, you need to know the following about your MWBE utilization plan. Do you think it is possible to meet the 30% goal? If yes, why? You do not need to have selected specific contractors at this point, only know how many of them exist in your region or who are interested in traveling to you to conduct the work. In addition to searching the directory, if you have previous working relationships with MWBEs or your general contractor has a prior track record they can speak to, this is relevant information to include in your narrative response in the application. If you don't think you can meet the 30% requirement, then you need to be able to explain why. We'll return to this a bit more detail in a few more slides as well. You do not need to complete a waiver at the time of the application. Only indicate that you might need to if awarded a grant. And I'm going to repeat that again. You do not need to complete an MWBE waiver at the time of the application. You only need to indicate that you might need to if awarded a grant. So a lot of people are wondering how this might affect their score. NYSCA and the panel understands that in rural areas that have fewer contractors to work with in general, there will also be a smaller pool of MWBEs. It becomes more of a concern for organizations located in areas that have a wealth of MWBEs, but who still choose to work with a non-MWBE. There may be reasons for this decision. However, it will need to be an appropriate reason as deemed by the state. We'll go over what those are in just a few slides. You may begin your search for MWBEs in your region, but the state will want you to conduct a statewide search if there are none in your immediate area. We'll also talk about this in more detail when we talk about searching the directory. So how do I get to 30% MWBE utilization? MWBEs can be primary contractors, subcontractors, subs of subs, and vendors. In some cases, your general contractor is your only contractor, and they are not subbing anything out. In that case, they are either all MWBE or non-MWBE. In other situations, the funds may be passed through to subcontractors. When an MWBE is a subcontractor of a non-MWBE general contractor, the value of their subcontract counts towards your MWBE goal. The flip side of this situation is when a general contractor is an MWBE, any subcontracts that they make to non-MWBEs subtract from the value of the contract that they hold with you that can count towards your MWBE goal. So we're going to go into a couple of examples of that. So in the first one, your general contractor is not an MWBE. And for this purposes, we're looking at the left side of the screen. So your general contractor is not an MWBE, and they have a contract of $100,000 out of a $100,000 grant. This makes it seem like your contract cannot meet your WMBE goal. However, your general contract is subbing out roofing in the amount of $30,000 to an MWBE. Thus, work carried out by the MWBE roofer is $30,000 in total, and you have met the $30,000 MWBE goal. You will not need to search for other MWBE contractors for the remaining portion of your grant-funded project. However, it is always good to exceed the goal in case something falls through. Alternately, in the example represented on the right side of the screen, you have an MWBE general contractor with a $50,000 contract of a $100,000 grant. At surface level, it seems like the 30% goal is already met. But then the general contractor subs out $30,000 to a non-MWBE roofer. The MWBE general contractor now only holds 20% of the work that they're directly performing. You will need to look at the remaining $50,000 in grant-funded expenses for other MWBEs to make up your remaining 10%. We talk a lot about a good faith search. What does this mean? In the narrative portion of your application, under the MWBE question, describe the efforts you made to search for MWBEs in the New York State Directory and the results of that search. You do not need to append the search results to your application. Describe your outreach efforts. We will talk about this in more detail when we go through the demo on searching the New York State Directory, and we also want you to talk about the results of that outreach. Keep in mind that just because a firm is certified in your city or neighboring state, it does not mean that they have gone through the process of getting certified with New York State. Similarly, you may have been in touch with contractors from what the state defines as a protected class, but this does not mean that they have met the WMBE state certification. So in what cases is a waiver considered? Again, I want to reiterate that you do not need to submit a waiver at the time of your application. You only need to have a sense of whether you think you need to and why, and explain that in your narrative response. These are some examples of when a waiver will be considered. No certified firms are available in your area when you conduct the search in the directory, or when you broaden the search, you do not find any that are willing to travel to your area. No certified firms opt to bid. The bids are not competitive. And in terms of competitive, what we're talking about here is a substantial difference in quotes that would impact the ability to keep the project on budget if you were to go with the MWBE vendor versus a more affordable quote. And finally, no certified firms have the appropriate experience to conduct the work. This often comes into play when working with historical properties and having work done by specialized vendors. We also want to reiterate that the onus is on you, the applicant, to make sure a vendor is New York State certified. We recommend that you speak to your construction team, your contractors and vendors, project manager, construction manager, etc. But in the end, it is up to you to verify by searching the directory that your vendor is in fact certified in the directory. So now we are going to talk about how you actually search the New York State MWBE Directory. I have 2 slides of instructions here that I am going to pause on briefly so that when you are going through this webinar, if you want to come back to the instructions while you conduct your own search, these will be available to you. And then momentarily, I am going to open up the directory and we will walk through things together. So the link was in that first slide, and it is https://ny.newnycontracts.com. This is what you will see when you open up the screen. You will scroll down to search the directory of certified firms and click on search the directory. This portal window will open for you. If you want to verify a business that you are already working with is in fact a New York State certified MWBE, you will search here in this section, search by business name or DBA, doing business as. If you are searching for contractors, you are going to scroll down to this next section, search by commodity code, and you are going to click to look up commodity codes. The window first opens, giving you the ability to search under construction, specifications, institute, divisions codes. So we are going to go through, roofing is a popular example. We are going to go through looking for roofing contractors. So I'll enter roof. And as you see, it opens up a number of commodity codes here. There's actually 220 records. So you're going to go through and select all that apply to your project. So let's say I'm looking for cast roof decks, steel roof decks, wood roof decks. I'm just going to add all that apply. Scroll on through. You'll see I start to get into period specific codes, so conservation treatment for specific types of roofing. After I've gone through all of the CSI codes, I then want to select the North American Industry Classification System, or NAICS codes. I will search for roof again. And again, I'm going to add all that apply. So roofing contractors, corrugated metal roofing. When I have gone through and examined all of the commodity codes and selected the ones that apply, I can either search for different contractors. I could say, start searching for window vendors. Or if I want to do each of those searches separately, I would just hit finished when I was done with searching for my roofing vendors. You'll see they're all represented up here, all the ones that I selected. The next thing I need to do is search by work district or region. And this refers to your New York State Economic Development Region. So we here have Capital Region, Central, Finger Lakes, and so on. So you'll just select the one that applies to you. If you are on the border of more than one, we suggest selecting all of them. So for this example, I'll do Capital Region and Mid-Hudson. I am going to confirm I am not a robot, and I am going to search. So here we've been presented with 7 firms with 8 certifications. One is both an MBE and a WBE. And you'll see that some of these are outside of my region. For instance, there's one in Brooklyn. That vendor indicated already that they're willing to travel. You would then download your search results. You can select whether you want to download to Excel or to CSV. It will download with all of the vendors' contact information, and then you can send a mass email asking whether any of the vendors would be willing to work on your project. In the event that your search results did not return anything, you would then broaden your search to the whole state, repeat your search, download your search results, and do the same thing. Send a blind CC email to all of them. And that is how we search the directory. If you are still listening, it probably means you have received a NYSCA Capital grant. So congratulations. Only matching grants of $100,000 or more are required to complete the MWBE checklist. We will go through the checklist together, but I just want to mention a few things first. This form is created by the New York State Division of Minority and Women's Business Development and is meant to serve multiple agencies across the state. A lot of what we'll be talking through is how to make the form work for your NYSCA grant. The checklist only needs to list NYSCA funded expenses. And where it says total project amount, it's actually asking about your total grant amount. We are going to look at an actual example of the checklist, and I will show you this exact spot, but I also just want to say it again because our capital projects budget has a section that has total project amount, and that actually refers to the total amount of your entire project. When you are completing the MWBE form, total project amount refers to just the expenses that NYSCA is funding. That is your total grant amount from NYSCA. The total MWBE utilization should be 30% more of NYSCA funds, not entire project funds, just NYSCA funds, and it should correspond to your capital budget, meaning that if you have $45,000 in NYSCA funds going to plumbing on your budget, you should have $45,000 in plumbing listed on your MWBE goal checklist. We'll look now at the relevant sections of the MWBE goal checklist. So the red text on this sheet provides instructions on what areas to complete, and the purple text advises where fields auto-populate with formulas that are already in place, and you do not need to enter anything. We're also going to go through a few examples of completing this. So project title, that comes from your application, prepared by, your email. These are all very straightforward. You'll see here where it says contract number, that will be provided to you at the time you are giving instructions on how to complete your contract. Here at the red arrow is the section that we've been talking about. You'll see it says total project estimate, but what we actually want entered in that spot is your total grant amount. Again, your NYSCA funded portion of your project. Do not enter anything in these cells below the total grant amount. As the purple text indicates, it will auto-populate as you complete other areas of the spreadsheet. If the drop-down menu over here for region is not working, you can enter your region here. And then up here in the top right, your MBE and WBE percentage will start to auto-populate as you fill the lower portion of the checklist, which we'll get to in the next slide. The last thing that we're going to talk about here is this section, prime to perform. You can ignore this section. You are not going to enter anything here. There are one or two exceptions, but they apply to so few people. We're not going to talk about it in this webinar. You would talk to us about it. But for the most part, you can just ignore it. As far as New York State is concerned, the grantee is the prime. So we just leave it blank. This is the lower portion of your MWBE goal checklist. So here under subcontracting availability is where you are going to enter all of the line items from your budget. So essentially the trade lines that indicate what contracts you are executing. So plumbing, electrical, general construction. For each one, you will enter the estimated value. Again, that needs to match up to what you have in your budget. You do not need to enter anything under percentage of project. That will auto-populate. You will indicate whether you conducted your MWBE search in the New York State Directory or not. And that will be indicated simply by entering a Y for yes or an N for no. The only reason not to conduct a search is either that you have already contracted with someone who you know is not an MWBE, and therefore it's implied that you're making that up on other portions of the project, or you have already met your goal and you do not need to continue searching for your particular trade lines in the directory to identify MWBEs. Here under number of MBEs identified and number of WBEs identified, you're just going to enter the results from that search that we just did together. And then down here under materials availability, this is a section that it again is utilized very infrequently for NYSCA grants. The only reason you would need to enter materials down here is if you are purchasing them directly from one vendor and then hiring a different contractor to actually install them. In most cases, the contractor is going to purchase materials on a grantee's behalf, and then that cost would be included as part of the overall contract and listed up above in subcontracting availability. So for example, you're putting in a new bathroom, your plumber has purchased all of the bathroom fittings, and you are not buying those at all. You will get one contract from your plumber, and it will include all of that, and it just goes up here under description of work, under subcontracting availability. So now we're going to start to look at a few hypothetical examples. This is a very straightforward example of a capital budget. We have here one line for general construction. for $100,000 and one line for mechanical HVAC for $45,000. Total grant amount is $145,000. These are all circled here on the budget, and these are going to carry over to the MWBE checklist. In this example, all of these contracts are held, well, all of them, both of these contracts are held directly between the grantee and the contractor. One contract for general construction, one contract for mechanical and HVAC, and there are no subcontractors. So in this example, we simply enter general construction under description of work, put $100,000 for the estimated value. Mechanical and HVAC gets $45,000 for the estimated value. Here, next to total project estimate, we entered our grant amount, which was $145,000, which matches down here our subcontracting availability. And then the rest of the spreadsheet auto-populates and completes that we have 31% of MBE vendors, because our search revealed that there are 3 in our region for mechanical and HVAC. This is a more complex version of a hypothetical capital budget. In this case, we are still have a grantee that has executed direct contracts with each of these line items, but there's quite a bit more in here. So in addition to a regular general construction contract, we also have one for structural steel. We've got that $45,000 for mechanical and HVAC again. We have $75,000 for a capitally eligible compact collection storage system. And then we also have $25,000 in soft costs for our architecture and engineering design services. So total grant in this example is $275,000. We have entered each of those line items from our capital budget and their corresponding estimated values. Again, this comes straight from the example on the slide before. We've then gone forward to conduct our MWBE search for each of them, except for collection storage systems. We'll get to that in a second. So for general construction, we've identified both MBEs and WBEs. We did not identify any for structural steel. We identified some of each for mechanical and HVAC. No search was conducted for collection storage because this came from a very particular vendor. That was the only place we could get the equipment we needed, and we knew that they were not an MWBE. And then we already had contracted with our architect, who we know is a WBE, and we confirmed by searching the directory. And so we just entered one there because we are not going to bid it out to multiple people. We've already contracted with that person. And so then it computes totals for both your MBE and your WBE. So we have 26% for MBE and 35% for WBE, and that well exceeds the 30% goal for the combined total. The next version of the budget shows how a subcontractor can affect MWBE goals. In this case, the grantee's general construction contractor has subbed out windows and openings as part of their overall $100,000 contract. This example shows how a non-MWBE subcontractor, in this case our windows and openings vendor, impacts the MWBE goal. While our general construction contractor is an MWBE and they have bid out $20,000 of their $100,000 contract as a subcontract for windows and openings. This vendor is not an MWBE and reduces the MWBE percentage by 7%. In this case, the project still meets the overall 30% goal, but it shows an instance in which you can see how the impact can play out, and we urge you to remind your vendors to understand this when subcontracting. In the next slide, we're working with the same situation. A $20,000 contract for windows and openings has been subbed out by the general construction contractor, but in this case, it's the opposite. So in this example, our general contractor is a non-MWBE, and they executed a contract with an MWBE. If the grantee had completed the form without considering subcontracts, the MWBE percentage would be just 26%, and the goal would not be met. Yet by including the $20,000 window and opening vendor contract, which represents 7% of grant funds, it brought the WMBE percentage up to 32% and allows the grantee to meet their goal. In both of these last two examples, your general construction line item will be less than what is reflected in the contract. But once someone looks at the budget and sees the windows and opening contract together, it will be clear. So now we get to talk about the MWBE waiver. You may know from the point of application that you will need a waiver, and you've indicated that in your application. Or you may not know until you start to bid out your project that you're going to need a waiver. Or you may believe that you have committed WMBEs and then for one reason or another, it doesn't work out and you're unable to meet your goal. Once you have been notified of a successful award, reach out directly to Capital Projects staff as soon as you suspect you might need a waiver to discuss. So let's say as soon as you get your contract package, and you already know you need a waiver, that is a good time to go ahead and let us know. But it can happen at any point in the contract process. Thank you for attending, and for any questions, please reach out to Capital Projects at arts.ny.gov, and good luck.